Everybody, this is Carl back again for another movie spoiler review, and I'll be wrapping up Father's Day movie month and Indiana Jones franchise reviews with Dial of Destiny that came out a couple of days ago, but I am reviewing it now. So yeah, it was a fun ride going through all the Indiana Jones films. Of course, like I said, Temple of Doom, not my favorite, as well as like Crystal Skull. Even though you can check out my review on that, like there's certain bits that after some time marinating or at least separating myself from it for so long, I can see certain things that, like, okay, I might initially been down on, but I can see the point of it. But still, it's not very good. But this film is definitely better than Crystal Skull. But it turns out to be the most expensive, one of the most expensive films ever made. Definitely the most expensive Indiana Jones film ever made. Of course, this wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg, as the previous ones were. This was directed by James Mangold, and Spielberg just produced this. Maybe after the whole events with Crystal Skull, he felt maybe compelled. Okay, I didn't have it in me to probably, make that last one. That's probably why it didn't turn out as good as people might expected it to. So I figured, like, I'll take somebody else take the reins on this one. And it's good. I liked it. Like I said, like, I think Crusade and Raiders is probably like far more of an Indiana Jones film than anything else. And I think a lot of people probably would agree that they probably should have maybe ended it at the third one, because it was it's probably like the best send-off out of all the send-offs. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe. Follow me in the links in the description below. My Twitter, my Twitch, my YouTube channel, as well as if you want to support the channel, you can follow me on Patreon at the $1 tier level if you have certain reviews that you want me to do, whether it's comic books, movies, TV shows, etc. And let's try to get this video to 100 likes. Yeah. So, once again, Harrison Ford reprising his role as Indiana Jones. But here we get Phoebe Waller-Bridge playing as Helena Shaw, the daughter of one of Indiana Jones's friends. We got Mads Mikkelsen playing as Jürgen Voller, former Nazi that is the main antagonist of the film. Antonio Banderas, who was a complete shock to show up out of nowhere in this kind of film. Don't know why. He wasn't in it very long. He plays this boat captain named Ronaldo. You got John Rhys Davis reprising his role as Sala. Toby Jones as Basil Shaw, father to Helena. And this is the same guy who was Arnim Zola in the Captain America films. So he once again playing some kind of, well, in that it was like Hydra agent, and here he's just like, oh, he's not one of the bad guys, but he's just like still in like a WW2 thing. So we get like a flashback during, like, getting towards the end of the Second World War in 1944, and Shaw is captured by the Germans, who is interrogating him on why he's there and why he has like an artifact, and they're questioning where it's like an associate of his. And of course, we had to see the whole de-age Harrison Ford, and if his remaining still looks pretty good, but in motion you can tell it might be subtle for people who are not paying attention to it, but for those who are probably more ingrained in the kind of industry with critics and those who help make movies in general, they can probably catch that a lot more. It's probably a pain in the butt if you're so involved where you just cannot separate yourself like normal people from just looking at it as like face value. But yeah, you can tell by the voice that, you know, Harrison Ford is like, yeah, he's not a young man anymore. And body-wise, they can't de-age the body, and so you can tell he looks pretty good for his age, but it's still an old man body, and it's especially the way it moves, and it's just the face. It looks good in some aspects, and a few others it doesn't. I just gotta point that out because I know a lot of people been pointing it out, but I'd be remiss if I didn't do it, because it wasn't a glaring problem because it wasn't there that long, but it's like they still haven't perfected it yet, and I don't think it's hard pressed. Maybe 10 years down the line, they might perfected it better. But we just don't have that technology now. So they're all on a train. Indy is trying to collect this spear. It's supposed to be like the same spear that pierced Christ during the crucifixion, the lance of Longinus. But it turns out to be a fake. So he goes and rescues Shaw, and Shaw overhears Voller mention about this gizmo that was invented by it was Archimedes, right? Yeah, Archimedes, who is only one half of the component that he invented, that supposedly is able to predict time fissures where you can go back in any point in time, depending on how you dial it up. They defeat the majority of the Germans on this train. Eventually, like, Voller gets captured and used in like certain projects for the Americans, not too dissimilar to how it was in real life, where certain stuff that we had, you know, after the war, you know, it was helped invented by certain Germans that used to work for the Nazis, but in lieu of prison time or execution. So now present day, Indy living in a house, an apartment by himself. He is no longer with Marion. They, you know, or it doesn't say they was divorced. It say they're separated, and you'll know what in a minute of what happened with like Mutt, because they didn't ignore that. It'll be kind of disingenuous. They still kind of disingenuous in my opinion, but it would be disingenuous if they didn't bring him up at all. But it's already kind of irks me that Ke Huy Quan couldn't come back at any point as Short Round, like a grown-up Short Round, but I guess he couldn't get involved for some reason. Indiana is celebrating, well, he's not exactly celebrating, but he's retiring from Hunter College, probably for the best, because like the way his life is, you know, looking into right now, this just doesn't look all that thrilling. It's like, you know, it's like you mentioned in like the Last Crusade. It's like when you get what is it, Crusade or Crystal Skull? It's like one of the two. When it's mentioning about, pretty sure it's Crystal Skull. It's like when you reach a certain age, life tends to take more from you than it does give you. And I was watching Dan Morrell's video on this yesterday, and he made a great point at the fact that, you know, certain movies should not, especially if it's part of like a franchise, we don't want to, because, you know, you don't want to actually more often than not, you want to see the way like the last movie ended. You want to see Indy in like a better straits, because you don't want to always have to see like your hero in like a terrible point in his life. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's just like, especially because like if they're reach a certain age, you want them to still be remembering. You can still pull off the same narrative, but it doesn't have to open with the movie where his life sucks now. But we do get Marion in the end, which the actress looks great. Karen Allen looks great for her age. Something about her smile that always gets me is like, I always thought her smile was so charming. But he is getting this. He's doing his last class. It's around the time of the Apollo 11 landing, and of course it's a space race, and it's all about sci-fi and stuff like reaching out there and looking to the future, and not so much looking to the past anymore, which makes Indy feel more like a relic in a way. And he's kind of half-assing it, teaching his class now, because in the previous films, is more people, kids tend to be more engaged into his lectures, into archaeology and history. And here is during like the 60s, late 60s, getting towards the 70s right now, where students around this time, not really interested. They're like so clocked out. But after he gets his little watch celebrating his retirement, he's followed by and then met up with what's her name? Helena. And Helena brings up about this Archimedes dial. And she, and him go to the college, into this like a room where they keep all the like antiquities and all these other artifacts. And they bring up about how like Helena's father started, after acquiring it back in WW2, he's starting to become a lot more obsessed with it, and it is in potentially going to endanger his relationship with his daughter, because it's like he just disheveled, and like that's all he seems to be putting his focus into was that machine, or that gizmo, until Harrison Ford, until Indy has to go to his house and take it from him, and he promised him he was going to destroy it, but he never did. But then they are pursued by this FBI agent, this black lady, with a bunch of other men that works for Voller, who is like upon leniency, or at least avoid potential prison time for war crimes, he works on stuff for NASA, and supposed to be getting some kind of like award from the president, but he doesn't show up, and he's like more concerned with getting that gizmo back, because his ultimate goal, you would think, which is kind of a good twist to the kind of narrative, where he's not planning on assembling this dial in order to go back in time and help Hitler. He's going back in time to kill Hitler and replace him, because he saw all the pitfalls that Hitler made that led to them losing the war, where he wouldn't make those same mistakes. And that's his ultimate goal. And there was this moment while before things start kicking off, they're in this, Voller and his men are in this hotel room, and this black guy who used to fight in the war, and he's like working in his hotel as a wait staff and bringing them like food. And the tension's kind of high here, because knowing this guy is a Nazi and this guy's a black man, and knowing what happens, what's going on with black people during like this period in time, like especially like the Tuskegee Airmen and the whole situations with that. And it's like, and matter of fact, it's kind of touched on in like, you know, Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show with like the first Black Captain America, which I did a comic book spoiler review, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, as I bring up about Isaiah Bradley in Red, White, and Black, about how black people was treated when they were serving their country, and all the mistreatment they still received, and the thanklessness they got afterwards, but later got in the future. But the thanklessness they got after the war, and like Voller is kind of like touching on that. That's like he mentions like, you didn't win the war, we just lost. And it's like, do you feel like a winner? You know, it's like, where are you from? Like originally, like you fought for this country. Do you feel like a winner? And, you know, placating to that. And it's like, that was a very, because Matt Mickelson is an excellent actor. He always blows my mind. I think everybody feels the same way. And I don't care what anybody says. I liked him in the first Doctor Strange movie. Sure, his character should have been like probably fleshed out more, but I still enjoyed him because the role he played was still fantastic. He's great as Hannibal Lecter, like a young Hannibal Lecter. He's very great in that too. So I thought he was planning on killing this wait staff, but he doesn't. Thank goodness. But the men follow. It tries to take what Helena found, but Helena, supposed to be the goddaughter of Indy, leaves him behind, and he was framed for murder of two of his former co-workers in the college. And they were questioning him in the back of the van during this parade. He managed to make an escape, because there's certain moments that happened that you saw in the trailers of this film years ago that you knew there was going to be something about, time travel, and you thought like, oh, you see this moment where he's riding on a horse through this subway, being chased by one of the men on his vehicle, and you thought, because we all thought, oh, he's riding on a horse from the cowboy age, and like he's on a modern day train in the future or something like that. We all thought that was going to be, everybody was picking it apart. I remember distinctly that was like a lot of people's estimation, but no, they're in like the 60s, and he just grabs a random policeman's horse, and he's being chased normally in present time. So he meets up with Sallah, who himself immigrated, thanks to Indy, immigrated to America. He had a wife, he had children, and they had grandchildren, and he's a cab driver now. Even though the actor is Welsh and he's playing an Egyptian guy, still an issue. I'm surprised nobody even raised that, but I think it's probably for the best. Don't raise it, because don't want anybody to get canceled for some BS for just playing a role. But he reminisces about like I want to go with you, Indy. I miss the desert. I miss like the adventures we had. And Indy's like, no, you got too much to lose. It's not gonna be one of those times. I'm just going there, finding a goddaughter, and getting out of this sticky situation, and hopefully clear my name. Which, by the way, there's a lot of not answered questions or situations in this film that was kind of glaring problem, like that black police officer and a couple of her team that was supposed to be like monitoring Voller and his like machinations, because Lord knows why they was helping him try to retrieve some artifact. Why is that so important to them? Because he should be just being like WICSEC and not helping him retrieve some lost item. But on the plane ride out of Tangier, his henchmen took down and they took her out and her men out. That was a situation of him being framed for murder. they never resolved that for Indy. I guess it's kind of solved off screen. I just thought I'd point that out. That's like a couple of things that's like I found a glaring problem. I was like, why is this like so unsolved? You just kind of let that go for some reason. Because you ask the director like now, like why you did not solve that, these two glaring. Well, I don't know about it being a glaring problem, but you kind of set up this police officer to be playing a major part in this film. She's got a very distinct look because it's the 70s or about to be the 70s, and she kind of got that, Misty Knight kind of quality about her, like all business and like good cop kind of situation. But she's taken out before you even reach like the third, before even reach like the second act of this film, she's taken out. I was like, what was the point of her? You could have just had some generic dude monitoring this, the situation with him, and just like immediately being betrayed and backstabbed and taken out. But I don't know. It's kind of like, setting up Marcus in the first film, and like you taking him out like halfway through, like you expect him to play some kind of major role. But the whole thing with the frame for murder, you don't solve that. At least visually, you want that scene to be solved and taken care of, so that we can have like, okay, that's good. That a satisfying payoff. We didn't get that. It was just kind of like a shame. I think that was like a major problem. So they all go on Tangier, where Helena, who supposedly has some kind of like degree for archaeology and everything like that, but she used her skills to be essentially a black marketeer, which is kind of ironic. The fact that later on she kind of like made like a jab at Indiana about calling him like a grave robber, and most people often in real world made that joke because there are real world for archaeologists, there are real world paperwork you have to get before you do any kind of dig in any kind of country for before you start digging up in their backyard to unearth and then put it on display in some kind of museum or whatever. And it's probably the archaeologist who points out that Indiana is not like he doesn't behave like a true archaeologist. He's behaving more like a grave robber. And I think the writers is kind of like taking that comment and implementing it verbally into the film, where, well, I think real life archaeologists probably have more credence to make that claim because it's their field. But the everyday people look at Indiana as like he doesn't stop being a hero, but he is a hero, and we don't want to think of Indiana Jones as like a grave robber. He's an archaeologist fighting for good and for history and keeping certain objects out of bad people's hands. So she's trying to auction off this piece of Archimedes dial to other like people at this table, and you meet up with this kid named Teddy, who you think is gonna be like a second-rate. Personally, I think he's like second-rate short round. I don't think he's needed, but for some reason he's tagging along for the rest of this film. Lord knows why, because honestly, the stuff he's involved in either doesn't need to be there because it doesn't really serve that much of a purpose, and secondly, it can have been fulfilled by secondhand people for like a one-off thing. Like the third act plane ride that he follows Indy with, it could have been served with any generic pilot with Helena. Anyway, I do love this line with Indiana and Voller confronting each other, and Voller made a comment about like, you should have stayed at home, and he's like, "Well, you should have stayed out of Poland," because that is just like because Indiana lived through the whole events of WW2. In fact, if you do a deep dive in the Indiana's history, he took part in WW1 for a little while. So he has like a very deep like animosity towards Nazis for good reason, because all his experiences have been like just these are malicious people. They're just like evil incarnate. Hell, like Nazis just barely even people, in my opinion, because like when you reach that point, you stop being like human in my eyes, and I think there's a consensus with a lot of people who see them that way, because they're just like despicable in the highest degree that has ever faced the planet Earth. So I feel for Indiana, and it's like his like just hatred of these monsters, and everything. Every time they come into play is always something to like for world conquering needs. Every time. So he's trying to keep the Tao out of their hands, and of course, Vola gets the thing. Indy, Helena, and Teddy chase after them, all the while these random gangsters show up, because one of them is the son of the mobster in this country who had like a thing with Helena that she, only used him to take some artifact of his so he can sell. And once again, don't need it, and or should have played at least some kind of bigger role, if anything. If you go and introduce them, they need to be like an extra antagonist on top of Volar's men. It's like they all want a piece of Helena and Indy. But no, after this, wonky, I won't say wonky, after this car chase, he gets trapped in this alley. You never see him again. And it's like, what was the point of him? Like I said, like you set up something, you don't finish it. And it's like, you did not need to have him there. Matter of fact, this, movie was like a couple of hours long. Could have trimmed it down, trimmed the fat a little bit, like take out this gangster, doesn't need him. So, the next best thing they need to do is find the other dial, which they discover is in the Argenian Sea. So he meets up with, let's say Antonio Banderas, which once again, it's like you got somebody like him. Once again, he doesn't last long, but he's like a frogman that Indy used to know. So they take a boat ride to the sea, and they go inside the waters to retrieve this box holding the second gizmo, the second part of the gizmo. But of course, you gotta bring in, this the last film, you gotta include some form of snake. So eels, I guess the next best thing is being like a snake of the sea. And of course, you gotta toss that in there because Indy is notoriously afraid of snakes. So you got to have that in there, which I don't mind so much, because like it'd be hard pressed not to include that at some point. But this whole moment kind of reminds me of Jim Carrey's The Mask, where like that box containing the mask, is in the sea and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me. I kind of expected like to see like the mask float up out of the box. But then Volar's men finds them. They hijack the boat. He wants Indy to translate this like wooden thing that holds the second gear, but they don't find that out until Indy sees it later. But there's a inscription on the front that Volar can't read, but Indy could, but he's not saying. But he shoots Antonio Banderas' character in order to get him to actually talk. But Helena steps up, seemingly just to get paid so she can get out of the situation. But she takes one of the dynamites, lights it up, and hopefully trying to send them on a wild goose chase. While the explosion occurs, the three get out on one of the bad guys' boats and takes off. Somehow, just because you have binoculars, you just immediately know they go into a different direction than what she stated earlier. I thought that was kind of weird, because you should have still assumed that they were still going that way. But they stop off at Greece, while Helena is like kind of celebrating, like kind of, because she's young, she's into this whole adventure thing, like, with nobody holding her down, she's like off on an adventure she's the not Laura Croft, but because it's kind of like the dynamic that she and Indy has to go under, that he has to kind of reclaim that love for adventure and the respect that he holds for history, and why he's always was there to protect it. And she has to learn about, like, there is a seriousness involved in this, where she's not taking it seriously, as he points out, like, my friend just died for that thing. And he's kind of like had to rejigger her mindset. It's like, okay, this is not like a cheering moment. It's like my friend died for this little mechanism. So they stop off at Greece, and Teddy's sitting there like pissing and moaning to Helena about, like, he won't let us sell this thing, right? When we got in this together, we was gonna, like, do this for, like, to make money. And it's like, God, you are just so not short round at all. You're just like a placeholder for short round, and not a good one at that. This kid was not charming at all. We did not need him. He's probably the most not needed at all. No shade on the actor, but it's just like, God, this kid was like not enjoyable to be around. It's like as soon as we got to that boat situation, I was wondering, like, why is this kid still staying here? And sure, him and Elena are like kind of like partners, the way like Indiana and Short Round were, but it's just like Short Round was fun to watch, and actually was like, I guess, like I said, he was like a placeholder for Short Round. He was doing like a Short Round thing, but it's just for some reason Short Round like had like a reason there to be there with Indy along the way. You couldn't leave him in China with the whole Zhao situation, but it's not like you had that kind of situation with Teddy. But I don't know, it's just something about Showround that was a lot more charming, fun to watch, and he served like a big purpose, like, helping Indy out of his like trance, and helping rescuing all those kids from enslavement. This kid just was there to get captured, which he was the one that took down this big oversized dude, or henchman dude, which in a gruesome way, I do have to admit, where it's like they was, handcuffed to each other, and he, locked them in this kind of fence thing underneath the waters while he's swimming to the other side to, get out of the situation. Very gruesome way to go. I gotta give him that. But Indy and Elena was trying to find Teddy, which they figure, well, we all know where Vola is going, so we'd have to beat them to it, and then once they come in there with Teddy, we can try to get him. And they find Archimedes' tomb, which on the front side of the tomb you see like a phoenix, but on closer inspection, this is like a phoenix for some reason have propellers on the wings. And then once they open up the casket, they see Archimedes' bones, but also there's a watch, like a broken watch, on his wrist, showing that, like, okay, watches wouldn't have been invented until like 1,000 years from his time. So knowing that the dial obviously works. Vola eventually shows up, thanks to the timely intervention of Teddy, which I guess he served a purpose, but honestly, they could have rewrite that to where we didn't really need him. He's not like a consistent need throughout the film. But Indy gets shot in the shoulder and taken hostage, while Vola and Teddy escape and follows them. And Indy learns Vola's reason to put this stuff together. They followed him through the time portal, and it's supposed to take him back to 1939 so he can intercept Hitler, kill him, and take his place. But they overshot it because, excuse me, because I forgot what word that Indy used. It was some kind of weather pattern that Archimedes never took an account of because it wouldn't have been discovered until many years after he was long since passed away. So it's kind of like a weather phenomenon kind of thing that you have to predict, or, it's just, the world changes over time and things rotate and stars, realign in different places than it would have been 2,000 years ago. So they end up getting caught up in the Sankara War. I think was it Sankara? The Siege of Syracuse. That was it. The Siege of Syracuse, where they're getting pelted by harpoons from these ships, and of course the people below confusing these planes as dragons. And it's like, man, y'all are effing up the timeline heavily. And of course, Vola's men are just taking shots from their guns, hitting these Roman soldiers. And it's like, oh my God, they're irreparably damaging the timeline just for this particular thing. Them even showing up is like causing ripple effects. Of course, they don't take that into account in this film because I guess you don't want to think about that. And there'll be another open-ended kind of open and unended type of thing. Because like after The Flash and like, other time travel movies, we learn about like living like kind of dangerous things in the past. Because even like setting foot in the past, stepping on a blade of grass in the past can have like damage. So shooting a bunch of Roman soldiers with guns is like, dude, you are skating by just barely with them confusing your metal aircraft for a dragon. But oh my God. But then thanks to Helena's timely intervention, she and Indy parachute out as the plane crashes into the ground. Vola and his men are dead, so that's the end of them. Then you see Archimedes and his assistants, I guess, show up and see Vola dead on the ground, and he takes like his watch, which I'm assuming is supposed to have been like the watch that you saw in his casket. But once again, leaving like a body of like, because if this gets dug up some point in the future where somebody's seeing like an old WW2 German Nazi uniform next to a bunch of artifacts based in Roman times, that could like confuse the heck out of a lot of scholars for some reason. But let's not try to think about that. It's the same thing I pointed out in like Last Crusade with the main bad guy in that, who dies from drinking from the wrong cup, and he had his Nazi pin on the ground of his corpse, and it's like things are crumbling to the ground, and hundreds of years later, if this gets digged up by future archaeologists and they see this next to a suit of armor from a medieval knight, they're gonna be confused. So it's like, ugh. Anyway, as Teddy's trying to get everybody to come to the place so they can get the heck out of there before the portal closes, Indy's talking about he wants to stay because he feels like he has nothing to live for in his present time, because we learn, because Helena asked him, what would you do if you had the time dial? And he points out the fact that I'll go back in time and tell my son not to join up in the Vietnam War because he will die. That's kind of... I know a lot of people did not care for Shia LaBeouf in his role as much in Crystal Skull. As I pointed out in my review on that, it's not, the actor's fault. Honestly, Shia LaBeouf is a great actor. Because there's plenty of actors who've been into crappy projects. It does not taint their skills as an actor. We saw it from Robert Pattinson and Hayden Christensen and, Andrew Garfield. So many. But Shia LaBeouf was just getting the shaft. So in lieu of trying to bring him back in some kind of fun cameo, which I was kind of expecting, no, they kill off his character, which just kind of sucks. But that drove Miriam and him apart because he could not console her, because he feels like she was inconsolable. He could not do much because she was so depressed. But he wants to stay in the past because honestly, he was overjoyed as an archaeologist being able to witness history being played out in front of him. It was like a rare occasion that you literally have to break time and space in order to get that done. Honestly, we all probably have periods in history that we would love to witness firsthand. I would like to see like medieval Japan aliving and thriving firsthand because I love that freaking culture. Or maybe see like the Wright brothers actually test out their first plane. That time period probably wouldn't be so good from a guy from my skin color, but I don't know, seeing, as he points out, I want to peek in on Cleopatra. I would love to peek on Cleopatra to see what she actually looked like, because she should be at least Egyptian, because some people like to think she's actually a black woman, but like certain archaeologists and historians point out that it's highly unlikely she's African, of African descent. But I actually get that kind of conclusion, at least for my personal, hardly anybody would probably believe me, but I'll have that from my own personal joy and knowledge that I'll have for myself, that I know what particular race Cleopatra was, and probably get some from her because she was a total freak, obviously. But that probably damaged the past too if I'm sitting there banging Cleopatra somehow. Yeah, leave a comment below. Like, if you had the dial of destiny, what time period you want to witness firsthand? But Helena has to knock Indy out because like he was desperately wanting to like stay and be with Archimedes and just live out the rest of his days here, even though he's shot and they don't have the proper medical care that he would need to survive. So he wakes up in the present. He sees Salah, his grandchildren, and then Miriam walks in. They reconcile, and the movie ends. It's still a fun movie, but there's stuff that they did not need or they did not, satisfy narratively. That the whole situation with, Indy being framed for murder. Where is that? The fact that they, probably irreparably damaged the past by having Nazi soldiers shoot at these Roman soldiers on the ground. The whole situation with that, female cop, like you set her up to play some kind of role, but she was just like very throwaway. And Teddy was useless. I'm sorry. And then of course you wasted Antonio Banderas. It could have just been any random actor. You could just play for this short little bit, but you probably paid out the yin yang just to get Antonio Banderas to come in for 10 minutes. That's like, you wasted so much freaking money on stuff that it was not needed. But beyond that, I still had like a decent time watching this. I went because it's kind of like I want to say a late celebration for Father's Day, but it's like a Father's Day gift that I set up for my father. Me and my younger brother set up because I paid for like seats for me, my father, and my two younger brothers. Well, the brother is a year younger than me. He paid for our snacks so we can all go out and watch the last Indiana Jones film. I thought it would be like a good thing because my father loves Harrison Ford. He's one of his favorite actors, and I thought like, okay, I want to take my father out to see the last Indiana Jones film in theaters, and a nice little family time with him and his sons to witness like because I grew up watching Indiana Jones as a kid with my father. Same thing with like the Star Wars. I became a Star Wars fan because of my father, because we watched the original Star Wars film on TV as a kid, and because he loves Harrison Ford. But I just sucked into everything about Star Wars because of my father. And we always gonna have that kind of shared moment, and it'll behoove me if I don't, have that, just as one more time with him. It's like, it's the last one, so it's like we gotta see this in theaters. And with all of his sons, him and all of his sons, we all go out so you can have like a nice little time. That I want to make sure like we all have that kind of cherished moment. But let me know what you guys think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. What you liked, what you disliked. Leave a comment below, and I'll have my chaotic lore video up tomorrow afternoon. And maybe X-Men Evolution Season 2 should be ready for review for that time. We'll see. Because I got some auditions that I want to take care of. Because usually I take a break from streaming on Sundays. But we'll see how things ship out. But I definitely have Chaotic Lore video up for you guys tomorrow. But anyway, I will see y'all soon. Take care. Have a great weekend. Peace.